For me, the heat on Twitter here is you committed a crime. What's the crime? Election interference. All right, my freedom-loving friends. We've had batch 1 of the Twitter files released by Elon. Now, in this video, I want to share with you the 2 key crimes that were revealed through the Twitter files, as well as my main conclusion of what these mean. Now, I'll share that with you at the end, but first, let's get into it. So, the brief overview summary, just to give it to you from the horse's ass's mouth. Crime number 1 is government-sponsored censorship. So there are internal communications in these Twitter files that irrefutably prove what we've known, but this is actual proof that government officials, Biden's team, Democratic National Convention, the DNC, if you will. I'd prefer not to, but I will. They had incoming communication to Twitter with regard to censoring free speech of Americans. So that's not a problem when a private company does it. It is the most significant problem when the government did it. Biden's campaign was doing it. The DNC were doing it. They list specific accounts that they want deleted, as well as specific tweets. Good fun. Crime number 2, interference with the 2020 presidential election. It's a crime. It's a big crime. It's notable. So, in the roughly 36 tweets that Elon basically had the Twitter files published, and they were published by Matt Taibbi. He's an independent journalist on Substack. And by the way, the mainstream journalists or outlets were probably like, hey, why did you use this independent journalist to release this? This is like our job. To me, it makes sense why Elon would use an independent journalist. It's a way of getting the information out as factually and blatantly as possible, rather than having regular news outlets be the sources of breaking information, because they don't do journalism for the most part. They do editorializing and propagandizing. So I think it was smart how Elon had these released. I think even better than Elon releasing them is having a journalist release them who can basically summarize things in a journalistic point of view. So in those 36 tweets with the Twitter files, I want to go through with you what I would consider the key tweets, which really highlight the 2 crimes as I see it. Government interfering with free speech, censoring free speech, and then 2020 election crimes. Can barely even mention it here on YouTube. So let's dive in. Starting on tweet number 8. The first 7, we're just sort of setting the stage. I think tweet number 8's first one with real substance, as you can see, says, by 2020, requests from connected actors to delete tweets were routine. One executive, speaking of Twitter exec to Twitter exec, so internal Twitter communications, one executive would write to another, more to review from the Biden team. The reply would come back handled. So here, as you can see in the screenshot of these Twitter email communications, these are tweets or accounts, looks like potentially both, coming in from the Biden team to Twitter saying like, we want to silence these. And Twitter exec sends it to another exec who then confirms, handled these. Okay. That's a problem. Then the 9th tweet of the Twitter files. Celebrities and unknowns alike could be removed or reviewed at the behest of a political party. Here you can see in Twitter email communications an additional report from DNC, so requests of who to ban, and notably James Woods. He's a Hollywood dude, but unlike regular Hollywood dudes, he's an outspoken conservative. So this, I believe, is what led to his ban on Twitter. He is back on Twitter now. I follow him. And then the 10th part of the Twitter files, which I think is really important to acknowledge because we're standing on principle here. It's not the Democrats were wrong. It's more the most important thing is the principle is what's most important, just to be redundant with the word important. And the principle's been violated. Violated by who? Both parties, actually. Significantly more violated by the left, but any party violating this is a major problem. So as we can see, Both parties had access to these tools, censorship tools, communication routes to Twitter. For instance, in 2020, requests from both the Trump White House and the Biden campaign were received and honored. However, tweet 11, this system wasn't balanced. It was based on contacts. Because Twitter was and is overwhelmingly staffed by people of one political orientation, there were more channels, more ways to complain open to the left, well, Democrats, compared to the right. And here you can see, it doesn't specifically say, but using educated discernment, it looks like this is a tally of Twitter employees and what amounts and percentage of donations went to Democrats during election cycles versus Republicans. And here you can see 2020 most recently, percentage of donations to Democrats from Twitter employees, 99.73%, whereas employees out of all their donations, only 0.27% went to Republicans. So this, of course, is relevant because it's just illustrating, yes, the system was open to both political parties requesting for First Amendment violations, but the reality is the overwhelming majority of Twitter employees are liberals or leftists, making it the route of censorship much easier and more prevalent to happen via the blood on the hands of the left. Now, why all this matters? Because I'm not telling you and I anything new, but what it is new proof. And I mentioned at the top, I'll say it again because this is the problem. Though I don't agree with private companies being able to censor speech of anybody, they're technically allowed to do it. What is not allowed, which violates the very foundation of our Bill of Rights, is no government official or agency, no aspect of the government can infringe on the free speech rights of its citizens. Government officials, DNC, the Biden campaign, communicating with Twitter to instruct them on censorship, that is the government doing it. That is a big problem. That is a big crime. And now there's much more substantial actual proof of this going on, which, by the way, shout out to Attorney General Eric Schmidt of Missouri, who currently has a lawsuit going on against the Biden administration for their alleged collusion with big tech in censoring the free speech of Americans surrounding the pandemic narrative. So those are the highlights of crime number one, the government infringing on our First Amendment rights. Now, crime number two, the old 2020 election. We know about the Hunter Biden laptop scandal and how Twitter helped suppress it. A few days ago, Elon sent out a tweet saying Twitter interfered in the 2020 election. These pieces of the Twitter files we'll go through are illustrating their interference in the election by way of the Hunter Biden laptop cover-up. Let's take a look. Tweet 18. Twitter took extraordinary steps to suppress the story, Hunter Biden laptop story, removing links and posts warnings that it may be unsafe. They even blocked its transmission via direct message, a tool hitherto reserved for extreme cases. Leads us to tweet 19. The White House spokeswoman Kayleigh McEnany was locked out of her account for tweeting about the story, prompting a furious letter from Trump campaign staffer Mike Hahn, who seethed, "At least pretend to care." I'm not going to read that letter. I don't think that's super relevant, but I just wanted to share that tweet for just kind of more contextual awareness. Tweet number 20. This led to public policy executive Caroline Strom to send out a polite WTF query. Several employees noted that there was tension between the comms policy teams who had little or less control over moderation and safety teams. So this is Kayleigh McEnany gets, Trump's press secretary, gets locked out of Twitter for sharing the laptop story. And this is the Twitter team getting unhappy communications from, I think, basically what amounts to the Trump administration. And then Twitter's response to those incoming communications comes to tweet number 21. Strom's note returned the answer that the laptop story had been removed for violation of the company's hacked materials policy. Now, it's important to know why Twitter removed the laptop. It violated their hacked materials policy. It's important to know because that's the reason, and it did not violate that policy. And we'll see internal Twitter doubts here in a second, but just to complete the loop. Hi, Caroline. Thanks for reaching out to us. Per checking, the user was bounced by Site Integrity for violating our hacked materials policy. Adding them here for further insights and guidance. So that's just basically the paper trail from Twitter on why Haley McCaney was blocked. Hacked material policy. Now this is interesting. Let me just read it and I'll tell you why I think it's interesting. Tweet number 22. Although several sources recalled hearing about a general warning from federal law enforcement that summer about possible foreign hacks, there's no evidence that I've seen of any government involvement in the laptop story. In fact, that might have been the problem. So this is interesting because with regard to Twitter's decision to suppress the story, speculation, and understandably so, has been, well, that's because whatever the Biden team or the FBI or whoever told Twitter, don't let that story out. That would be a tremendous problem. But this is suggesting the heat might be solely on Twitter for this, because the internal communications at Twitter we'll see more of in a second were between Twitter employees. This last tweet is ending. There seems to be no evidence of government involvement in the laptop story. In fact, that might have been the problem. The problem for Twitter. What that's suggesting is maybe if the government was involved, they'd be telling us no, it's not hacked material. It's not Russian disinformation. It's unfortunately a real story. Now, I doubt the government would have been honest with that. But why this is interesting is because it puts the heat more on Twitter. In what way? Well, I'm not a lawyer, but as you know, I do identify as a lawyer. So for me, the heat on Twitter here is you committed a crime. What's the crime? Election interference. It's one thing if, it's interfered with, and it's basically whose fault. It's saying here the fault might not be on the Biden administration. It might just be on Twitter. Tweet number 23. The decision was made at the highest levels of the company to block the story, but without the knowledge of CEO Jack Dorsey, with former head of legal policy and trust, Vijay Gad, playing a key role. So pinning the blame on why was this story about the laptop blocked. And it's just also interesting several times throughout the Twitter files dump, they seem to go out of their way to absolve Jack Dorsey of responsibility here. And, if that's actually the truth, cool. Just good to know the clear picture, who is making the decisions. And apparently some of the decisions were made without the oversight of then CEO Jack Dorsey. Tweet number 24. By the way, how you doing? Doing okay? Take a breath. You angry? Me too. Let's get through this together. They just freelanced it, is how one former employee characterized the decision. Hacking was the excuse, but within a few hours, pretty much everyone realized that wasn't going to hold. But no one had the guts to reverse it. Tweet number 25. You can see the confusion in the following lengthy exchange, which ends up including Gad and former Trust and Safety Chief Yoel Roth. Comms official Trenton Kennedy writes, I'm struggling to understand the policy basis for marking this unsafe. That's important to know because that's just within Twitter, some people who maybe were standing on the principle of whatever their policies were, as screwed up as they are, they still had policies, but Twitter officials basically saying, yeah, I don't think this laptop story suppression is warranted on our policy of not publishing hacked information, because they're like, we have no evidence this thing is hacked. Then the next tweet, 26. By this point, everyone knew this was fucked, said one former employee, but the response was essentially to err on the side of continuing to err. Tweet number 27 amplifies the same point. Former Vice President of Global Comms, Brandon Borman, asks, can we truthfully claim that this is part of the policy, spelling out his email. To Ian's point, can we truthfully claim that this is part of the policy, i.e., as part of our approach to addressing potentially hacked materials? We are limiting visibility of related stories on Twitter while our investigation is ongoing. So again, this is another Twitter higher up, apparently, decision maker doubting that this falls into their hacked materials classification. so much to the extent that he's literally saying, can we truthfully claim that this is part of our policy? And then the final tweet with relevance, in my opinion, to the laptop story cover-up within Twitter, tweet number 28 responding to the previous question, can we truthfully claim this falls into our policy, guys? To which former Deputy General Counsel Jim Baker, again, seems to advise staying the non-course because caution is warranted. Fun fact, before we read that, Jim Baker, also former counsel for the FBI. Just know that. So from Jim Baker, I support the conclusion that we need more facts to assess whether the materials were hacked. At this stage, however, it is reasonable for us to assume that they may have been, and caution is warranted. Context there, Jim Baker, former, I believe, deputy counsel for the FBI. He was majorly involved in pushing the narrative and investigation into the Russia collusion hoax, which was zero facts, completely made up. So he was the one pushing that, obviously against Trump. And here he is, Twitter's deputy general counsel, attorney, apparently bringing that same bias, supporting the conclusion, yeah, this falls into our hacked material policy, though we have no evidence. We're going to put it there. There's no evidence that it was hacked material. Yet, with that non-existent evidence, none of which Twitter had because it didn't exist, they still decided this is probably hacked material. Was that a general earnest discernment that it's probably hacked material? Or was it just a political bias that very well may have influenced the 2020 election? You get to be the judge, but these are just the facts. There's going to be more Twitter files released, so I'm going to have my eyes open for that. I find it very interesting. One question that comes up before I give my ultimate conclusion of what all this means, one question is, what's going to come from this? Will there be prosecutions? Who knows? I don't know. For some reason, I don't feel super optimistic that law and order and justice will be served here. I would imagine so many people involved here operate above the law. So will there be justice there? Could be. I'm not going to put my money on it. But what we do know will come from this is what's already coming from this, which is irrefutable awareness. And not just awareness based on speculation, not even awareness based on the truthful reality that lacks proof, because we're no longer in that realm. This is now awareness coming from a truthful reality that is based in actual proof, email communications, documents. That matters. So at the very least, more people will be waking up to this reality. It'd be great to see justice served at a level of the law, but we can't outsource the power of change that we wish to see in the world to even the law, even though that should be there, that should help, it should be on the side of truth. Who knows if it will be, but ultimately, changing the world and the corrupt systems that we live in, the immense power to do that is in the hands of you and I. And the more we're aware, especially with irrefutable proof, the more of our power we reclaim. Here's my ultimate conclusion of what all this means. I think the most important point here, in my professional attorney opinion, is this proves domestic terrorism. What do I mean by that? Anyone in the government who is sworn to protect and preserve the Constitution, but not only doesn't do that, but does the opposite of that, obliterates the constitutional right of freedom of speech. That is an act of domestic terrorism from my point of view. And I believe we now have significant proof that the domestic terrorism of diminishing the rights of U.S. citizens has been committed with regard to the DNC communicating with Twitter on who and what to censor, the Biden campaign on who and what to censor. Changed my mind that that's domestic terrorism. That is a high crime, I think. Sure as hell should be. I think that's the main conclusion. I think Elon Musk I very much admire him for airing out the dirty laundry for the world to then digest and do what we will do with this. I think this is pulling the curtain back on a lot of devious behavior that has affected you and I on a daily basis, not only with our online communication, our discourse, what we're allowed to say, but also in potentially who's leading our country right now. This has absolutely affected our lives. So we're getting to see more and more truth come out about this. We're owed that. We really are. So my hat's off to Elon Musk for doing what he didn't have to do. I think it's great. And for all I know, it potentially puts his own company at risk. I doubt he's personally liable for any of this because this was well before his time. Does Twitter get prosecuted in crimes? I don't know. I think he's putting the company more at risk. And I don't know. For all I know, if there were going to be legit congressional investigations into this, maybe it was actually more risky for him to keep all this private. Could make him a bit of a culprit in the crime. I don't know, but it's not going to stop me from speculating that could be. So that's the deal. Crimes have been committed. We have proof in the Twitter files. Domestic terrorism for me is the bottom line here. I ain't a fan of it because I love America. Until next time, the next drop of Twitter files are going to be released. We'll do a review of that. I'll tell you what I think and love to learn what you think about this current batch of Twitter files being released. Kind of living through like our own Watergate and like all that other stuff that was before my time. So it's kind of exciting times, especially when the momentum's starting to swing in the truthful direction after it swung in the direction of corruption so far and for so long. So let me know in the comments what your takeaways are, your thoughts. Look forward to seeing them. Till next time, my friend, stay free.